Okay, go look at a map of Europe real quick. We'll wait.
Come on, we've got a podcast to do.
All right. You can look at your nearest map or type Europe into Google Maps. Notice anything missing?
Looks like one of the countries isn't labeled along the northern coast.
Yep, that's not a country, at least not a country by itself. It's tucked in between Poland and Lithuania, and it's very much a part of the Russian Federation, but it isn't contiguous with the rest of the country.
So what is it? Well, it's Kaliningrad, an exclave of Russia.
And on today's episode of GeoStory, we're going to talk about enclaves and exclaves. What are they and how they got there? Okay, Callie, take it away. What are they?
Let's start with enclaves. An enclave is a state that is entirely surrounded by the territory of another state.
We're going to dive first into the country of Italy because it contains two enclaves.
The first being Vatican City, which is the smallest sovereign state in the world at just 100 acres in size. It's about as big as the Mall of America. Vatican City is encircled by a 2-mile border with Italy lying in the heart of Rome.
The founding of the sovereign state can be attributed to the signing of the Lateran Treaty. After continued disputes between the Italian government and the Catholic Church, an agreement was reached in 1929 in which Benito Mussolini, the head of the Italian government at the time, signed the Lateran Pacts. The terms established were A, a political treaty recognizing the full sovereignty of the Holy See in the state of the Vatican City, and B, a concordat regulating relations between the Catholic Church and the Italian state.
The Vatican operates in a similar manner as other countries do, in that it has its own currency, flag, anthem, license plates, and even guards. However, a slight difference is citizenship. It is not given to those at birth, but is granted by the Pope himself. Another difference is that the Vatican City does not have a flowing economy of imports and exports, but relies on tourist purchases like souvenirs, mementos, stamps, and museum admissions.
Speaking of the Vatican's guards, if you have a chance to Google Vatican Swiss Guard uniform sometime today, please do. They certainly make me feel better about my fashion choices.
I stumbled on a photo during research, and it just put a smile on my face.
Well, the city holds an immeasurable amount of history within its small borders. There are over 50 museums tucked inside of tiny walls, with notable ones like St. Peter's Basilica and the Sistine Chapel. I even think the Ninja Turtles painted a bunch of stuff there.
I think you've got your famous painters mixed up again.
I'll have to check my notes.
Italy's second enclave is San Marino, which is nestled into Mount Titano. It's the oldest continual sovereign state. It was originally formed by a stonemason named St. Marinus when he built a small church and founded what is now the city and state of San Marino back in 301 AD. It remained independent throughout turmoil, and even when Napoleon invaded Italy, he respected the country's boundaries.
During the conquest and unification of Italy, Giuseppe Garibaldi was a pivotal figure in turning a series of small states into an entire nation. In 1849, he found himself surrounded by 3 enemy armies. He sought safety within the fortress walls of San Marino. Garibaldi later helped ensure that San Marino would be excluded from formal Italian unification in 1867.
During the Civil War in 1861, the United States recognized San Marino as an independent state when Abraham Lincoln accepted an honorary citizenship with this letter.
Great and good friends, I have received and read with great sensibility the letter which, as Regent Captains of the Republic of San Marino, you addressed to me on the 29th of March last. I thank the Council of San Marino for the honor of citizenship they have conferred upon me. Though your dominion is small, your state is nevertheless one of the most honored in all history. It has by experience demonstrated the truth, so full of encouragement to the friends of humanity, that government founded on republican principles is capable of being so administered as to be secure and enduring. Abe Lincoln.
That's Republican as in a nation as a republic, not a political party. Later, San Marino would stay neutral during both world wars, despite Italy's alignment. Today, the country is known for its banking sector, but also produces apparel, wine, and cheese. Much like the Vatican, it also profits from the sales of unique stamps and coins.
So now, if you've still got your map up, go all the way south. If you peek at South Africa, you'll notice another anomaly. But this one is our last enclave. It's the Kingdom of Lesotho. It's about the size of Maryland or Belgium. It officially dates back to an 1869 treaty between the Basotho people and their ruler, King Mashushu, and the British government. It was a British protectorate and later a colony called Basuto Land under the rule of Queen Victoria, but the country gained its independence in 1966.
Modern-day Lesotho is the only country in the world that's entire territory lies above 1,000 meters, or 3,200 feet. While it has productive diamond mines, it also has an unusual resource to export: water. Through a project in the 1980s, Lesotho has a series of dams that provides all of the country's electricity, but also creates a surplus of both water and electricity to sell to South Africa.
The country influenced Ryan Coogler, the director of the Marvel blockbuster Black Panther. He was inspired by, quote, as an enclave able to protect its independence because of its terrain. The movie takes place in the fictional hidden kingdom of Wakanda, but he uses colorful blankets from real-life Lesotho.
Next, we want to talk about exclaves. Now, an exclave is a portion or part of a state that is geographically separated from the main part by the territory of one or more states. There can be semi-exclaves as well, where the country has a coastline along its borders. The state of Alaska is a great example of this. It is geographically separated from the main part of the United States by Canada and also has access to open water.
To give an example of a true exclave, we go to Spain and France and the Treaty of the Pyrenees, which was signed back in 1659. This treaty gave us the modern borders of the two countries, but it also gave us Yvia. This 5-mile square area of Spanish territory is located in France, separated from Spain by a 1-mile strip of French land.
When the treaty was signed, all of the villages in the area were ceded to France, but since Yvia was only a town, it remained with Spain. While for some time it required special passes to transit through French territory. Now both countries are part of the Schengen area, allowing control-free access to and from the municipality.
There are countless examples of exclaves speckled throughout country, state, and even the county level right here in the United States. Let's go back to the early 1800s and explore the fascinating story behind what is known as the Kentucky Bend. In 1811 and 1812, there were a series of massive earthquakes that riddled the area surrounding the Mississippi River.
The first earthquake to hit was on December 16, 1811, in northeast Arkansas. The second occurred in Missouri on January 23, 1812. And shortly after, the third occurred February 7, 1812, along the Reelfoot Fault in Missouri and Tennessee.
The United States Geological Survey Department had not been formed yet, and there were no seismographs at the time, but modern researchers interpreted journals, newspaper reports, records of ground shaking and damage, and concluded that these earthquakes ranged in magnitude from 7.0 to 8.0.
The third earthquake, the one that occurred on February 7th of 1812, is the one that we want to focus on, because it essentially transformed the landscape between Kentucky and Tennessee.
The uplift of the Reelfoot Fault, which runs under the Kentucky Bend, dammed the Mississippi River in two places, causing river waterfalls and rapids with a 30-foot drop. Eyewitnesses reported that the river flowed backwards, saying they had to, quote, hold on to their hats while their riverboats shot upstream.
Can you even imagine the scene?
I guess that's what they mean by up a creek without a paddle.
Must be. The magnitude of the earthquake devastated the area as islands were formed and demolished, and a giant hole opened, which was later filled with water and is now called Reelfoot Lake. The course of the Mississippi River was forever changed due to the earthquake.
So here's where it gets interesting. In the aftermath, surveyors were still working to establish the borders, and it's unknown whether they didn't know, they got lost, or the new bend in the river confused them while creating the state's boundaries. So the Kentucky border was drawn completely through the Mississippi River and out to the other side, creating a little bubble of land belonging to Kentucky but only connected to Tennessee.
Tennessee disputed the boundary for decades, claiming that it was incorrectly drawn and sovereignty should belong to Tennessee. A church called Compromise was built right on the line of Kentucky and Tennessee. Mark Twain noted this in his 1883 novel, Life on the Mississippi, that families sat in church every Sunday morning on either the Kentucky side or the Tennessee side, depending on their loyalties. There was even a Civil War skirmish here called the Battle of Island No. 10, where the Union captured a Confederate river blockade.
The town of Kentucky Bend, or also known as New Madrid Bend or Bubble Land, is 17.5 square miles and lies within an oxbow loop of the Mississippi River, completely surrounded on all sides by Missouri and Tennessee.
There's another one of these river oddities in Jared's home state of Nebraska. When flying into Epley Airfield in Omaha, you'll land in Nebraska, but to drive south to downtown Omaha, you'll have to go through a brief part of Iowa called Carter Lake.
In 1877, a flood caused the Missouri River to shift eastward, leaving some of Iowa's territory on the western side of the river, Nebraska's side. It was a contentious issue for a long time, resulting in the court case of Nebraska versus Iowa of 1892, which went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court to decide that the area in question still belonged to Iowa.
But the residents weren't satisfied. They were being taxed by Council Bluffs across the river, but receiving no services in return. The town seceded in 1928 after the Iowa Supreme Court ruled that the town had the right to divorce Council Bluffs.
The townspeople thought it more reasonable to join Omaha and hoped to be absorbed into Nebraska, but the state refused to consider the offer. Caught between an unfriendly neighbor and a river, the area held elections and became its own incorporated city of Iowa in 1930, just showing you that enclaves and exclaves are all around you and you may not even know it.
I actually used to live in an exclave. When I first moved to Denver, I lived in the city of Glendale, which is an exclave of Arapahoe County. It is completely surrounded by the city and county of Denver.
See, they're all over. And the place we mentioned to start the episode, Kaliningrad, it was a Prussian settlement from 1255 that was the easternmost city of Germany all the way up until World War II, when it was captured and given to the Soviet Union. Germany only finally renounced their claims in a 1990 treaty.
We could honestly spend all day telling you stories about enclaves and exclaves and their unusual borders.
So we've compiled a list of a variety of other notable places, and we'll be including those on our Facebook page, just in case you're as fascinated with them as we are. Think about all the differences a political boundary can have between an enclave or exclave and a neighboring territory. Laws, culture, resources, taxes, education, all could be remarkably different by just walking a few feet. Now, Callie found a great quote.
History is littered with the corpses of would-be states that never made it, empires that dissolved, and recognized countries that disappeared into the embraces of more powerful neighbors. We found this quote in a book called An Atlas of Countries That Don't Exist by Nick Middleton. We stumbled across this at a local public library and just was so inspired, and that's where we got it for this episode.
Callie and I would like to explore this topic more in depth on an episode further down the road, sharing the stories of tiny countries, those who made it, those who didn't, and those still caught in the middle.
Thank you, everyone. As always, feel free to shoot us an email, geostorypodcast@gmail.com, or feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter @geostorypodcast. See you next week.
Join us next week for A Tale of Two Tales.
Sorry.